because like it's really random, right? It's coming in, coming out. We're turning it off. No, we didn't put any birthday. Yeah, so some people who enrolled, you sent it to everyone, right?
I sent it to everybody on the portal.
Yeah, so everyone on the portal, we sent it the thing, so they have a choice of what.
But they're just like, okay, so this is the plan.
There are virtual people, but we're not going. They're not included in any activities. You know, we'd have to look at the YouTube. It's just on YouTube, so you don't know, right? How can you know if it's just YouTube? Yeah, we didn't circulate them. Like these people plus people who fly, but they're not in many activities. Yeah. No, many did apply, but I don't know how many applied. Okay. Yeah, so I think it's working now. Yeah.
Okay, so far we've had general topics in linguistic anthropology. So now we're actually going to get into the mother tongue material. So a lot of what I'm going to discuss is going to be relevant to questions and comments you guys have already made. So this is defining and imagining mother tongue in South Asia. Okay, something we've already talked about. Where does the concept of mother tongue come from? We know the concept of mother tongue originated in Europe, but its exact history is unclear, and actually more research is needed on this topic. Later in the course, we're going to be talking about Sumathi Ramaswamy's 1997 book about Tamil linguistic passions of the tongue, but this is an excerpt from that book. She writes that mother tongue is a construct that emerged at a particular historical moment in the complex transformation of Europe's linguistic landscape from the middle of the second millennium, as Latin was progressively withdrawn from the public domain and the vernacular was elevated as the language first of the state and then eventually by the 19th century of the nation. Right, so vernaculars were trying to replacing Latin as the language of the state. So she's one of the few scholars to actually give some idea about the origin of mother tongue, but other scholars writing about mother tongue sort of leave it as it's murky, it's unclear, more research is needed. Right. So why do we relate our first language with a mother? Why do we find this is the case at so many places all over the world that we relate language to a mother? Is it that infants and babies primarily learn language from their mothers because the mothers are the main caregivers of the baby? And what is a father tongue? Does anyone know what a father tongue is? I Googled it the other day, and there's actually a definition of a father tongue that means a second language in which you are fluent in. Yeah, did you know that? You knew that? Yeah. Yeah, okay. And then my last day in Colombo, a friend of mine just started asking our friends randomly, what's your father tongue? And people started laughing. So why did people find that question funny? You ask someone their mother tongue, they don't start laughing. Why is that funny to go up to friends and just ask, what's your father tongue? Right? It's unexpected, right? We associate language generally with mothers. And of course, the term mother tongue is, highly established. So this is Ong cited in Sumati Ramaswamy's book. Why do we think so effortlessly of the first language we learn as our mother tongue? The concept of mother tongue registers deeply the human feeling that the language in which we grow up, the language which introduces us as human beings to the life world, not only comes primarily from our mother, but belongs to some degree to our mother's feminine world. So it comes from the mother, but then also belongs somehow to the woman's feminine world or domain. But Ramaswamy critiques Ong a little bit and says that Ong does not discuss how first language became attached to our mother's feminine world. It's just sort of assuming that mother tongue is attached to the mother and the mother's feminine world, but doesn't discuss how. Is it a cultural universal, right? That language would be attached to the mother's feminine world, or is it something that historically occurred? Now, mother tongue in India and South Asia. Well, we know that mother tongue gained salience in India in the mid-19th century. So it's rather recent, and it has been highly pervasive ever since. It has been central to language and education policy, scholarship in the humanities and social sciences, and lay conceptions of language. Meaning like our everyday ideas about language, mother tongue is essential. Mother tongue was institutionally legitimized since through its use in the census since 1881, like the first all India census. But its definition in the census has changed over time. So the first census of 1872 did not refer to mother tongue. The census of 1881 defined it as the language spoken by the individual from the cradle. And this information is from a book by Patanayak called Multilingualism and Mother Tongue Education. Some of you might know the book. It's a very excellent book on this topic. Now in 1891, the term mother tongue was replaced by parent language. And then in 1901, parent language was replaced by language ordinarily used. They're not the same thing, they're quite different, right? Parent language versus language ordinarily used. In 1911, it became language ordinarily in the household. That's quite different than language ordinarily used, right? Because you might use a language outside the home that you're not using at home. And your parents may speak different languages in the home, of course, as you guys know well. Then in 1921, it reverted back to language ordinarily used. Language ordinarily used where, right? The term mother tongue has been used since the 1931 census consistently. In 1951, mother tongue was defined as the language spoken from the cradle. In cases of infants and deaf mutes, give the mother tongue. It's what?
We're talking about definition of mother tongue in the context of this is an event that happens once every 10 years. We're talking about an individual. For a very small period, somebody comes and introduces and they do. Does this have any implication at the ground level? Does it affect people as much as what is the impact of this very short period?
Okay, yeah, the census is given every 10 years, only for 10 years. The definitions have changed. Is it impacting people at the ground level? When you look at the census itself from these different years, almost all of them are easy to find on, and you see in the census, they give instructions to the census enumerators about how to ask about mother tongue. So then you have the census enumerators going to households with these, defining a mother tongue a certain way when they ask their tongue. So do you think that would have an impact on people's ideas of mother tongue by the
The review happens for a very short period. If somebody sits, so after the definition,
I mean, does anyone else have any ideas? This definitions were only used for a 10-year period by this enumerators who came to the household. Do you think it would affect people's senses of mother tongue?
there was an after census. Regarding the new census, the data has declined. You can 80% of multiple education people together now. I have not seen it.
Somebody else?
Can't hear.
So when the family unit enters the census system, I think that is a very particular, like a moment where we see change in terms of how policy is being designed or developed, or how the nation's future is being considered. So from the individual group levels, you're coming down to families. After this, probably we go down to the individual. So I think it is perhaps significant.
It is what?
It's significant in terms of policy. For policy, it surely is significant, I believe.
Right, so I was saying the definitions in the census also reflect other policies. It wasn't limited to the census, is that? Yes, that's an excellent point. Would you like
What
to?
you pointed out is very important, and that is that policies, these things matter a lot. But how is a person supposed to know the categories that are being looked at? I think was that part of your, yes. I remember in Uttar Pradesh, many people would answer Pasha, Boli. I heard one man answer Tutti Frutti. So, and then the census person wrote down What do you think? Hindi.
Yeah, and I think this was another problem in even as early as this linguistic survey of India when it came, and Grierson, George Grierson, who developed that linguistic survey of India, and he said that most of the time he got no answer for they asked what the language is and no answer, and so they kind of made those different linguistic categories, but over time, you see, it's not just one census maybe, right? But from that period on, now many of us think, like even I think maybe I'm a Gujarati because I speak Gujarati, but I don't, maybe that even idea that my language was my identity wasn't even there, right? So over time it's developed. They organized the states around it, they organized our schools around it, everything. So probably not one census, but the fact is that this has kept going on and was the basis for making institutions.
And we're going to get to a point that they stuck with one definition, like I'm going to say, one definition solidified and it stayed the same. Just early on, they were changing it a bit. They what? They what?
It changed after the end of the colonial rule as well. The concepts changed.
Mhm.
That's how it shows here.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll get, I think it's the next slide. We'll talk about the current definition. But yes, absolutely, like you said. So since 1961, the Indian census has used the following definition of mother tongue. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. Mother tongue is language spoken in childhood by the person's mother to the person. If the mother died in the child's infancy, the language mainly spoken in the person's home in childhood will be the mother tongue. In the case of infants and deaf mutes, the language spoken will be recorded. Right, so it was at after the end of the colonial period, like you said.
So what happens to the internal migrants within
What?
a country? What happens to the internal migrants within a country? So suppose I'm a person who stays in the southern region of India and my parents speak the language of southern India and then they move up north, right? But due to the cultural context that I live in, I grow up learning Hindi and not the, the so-called mother tongue. What is my mother tongue then? And I'm actually a living example of this.
Well, I am not a census enumerator,
Yeah,
so.
what happens to such a person? So what happens
So
to
I
such a
think
person in
you're hitting the
census?
core problem. But let me get through the definitions and then I have a discussion that we can talk about all of these things. But that's precisely the problem.
So that's where the question.
That's why the big critique that I'm going to talk about is that the census is not accurately representing languages in India. And one of the reasons that they're not is what you exactly gave. The case of migration complicates mother tongue tremendously, right?
Another question. We both actually were talking about.
No, we actually off class, we were both talking about the whole idea of matrilinearity and patriarchy, patrilinearity.
Yeah, I was going to get to those
Yeah.
critiques in a minute. Yeah.
Exactly. So I just wanted to point out that aspect of the definition as well.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to get that into a minute. So, just to review the different glosses and definitions of the census. I say glosses because some of the census did not use mother tongue; it just glossed it. So the glosses and definitions in the census reflect the following census of mother tongue: a language used in the home since birth, a language commonly spoken in the home, a language parents speak to their children in, and a language a mother speaks to her children. So why was this shift? Why was there a shift from language ordinarily used to a mother tongue? So that's a language spoken by a mother to a child. So that was the shift from language ordinarily used to mother tongue, the mother tongue being the language spoken by a mother to her child. Now, this is something I did not know until reading Patnayak's book. Where did the census definition of mother tongue come from? Patanayak writes that the census definition was based on the definition of mother tongue in Webster's third New International Dictionary. The language of one's mother, the language naturally acquired in infancy and childhood, one's first language. But none of the glosses and the definitions in the census use the term first language. Why not? In an Indian context, why did they decide to take this dictionary definition but remove first language? Anyone have an idea? Could it be, yeah.
It might be that it implies that there are others, so that there could be some confusion.
Yes. By saying first language, you're implying that there are other languages spoken in the home. Also, that your primary home language could be different than your mother's home language. And actually, in this case, I should be saying variety and not language. Your mother may speak a different variety than you predominantly speak in the home. Right? Were you going to add something?
I'm thinking out loud and other people can contribute to it. But given the time period, it's pre-colonial period. And maybe because we transgress the language boundary so often now, it doesn't occur to us. Maybe people did not use or like converse in that many diverse languages on a regular basis, given what was the literacy rate, how educated were
Okay.
women. So I think it is a safe assumption that the mother only speaks one language. Or maybe if she's educated, then but then how many women were educated in 1861, 1871, 91, 1900s? So I think they were just assuming that the mother or the people at home only speak one language at a given point of time.
So I think what you're saying, there's really no need to include first language. You
No,
can
I'm
just
not
ask the
saying that.
mother's language.
I'm saying they were probably assuming, that's why they didn't make the distinction between first language, second language, and third language, or multiple.
That's a very good point. That's,
Mother only has one tongue.
We can say one more thing, like it's
the
not
mother
just-
only has one tongue, exactly.
But then why were they using first language ordinarily used before?
The what?
But the census used the definition of language ordinarily spoken before that. So why would that definition exist if this is true? If this assumption was
I think,
Speaking also, I think they're again assuming there is only one language spoken ordinarily.
because the mother's Tamil and the father's Malayali.
But then that was also
Language ordinarily used in the home might be, like,
The family
yeah.
would speak a homogeneous language. They weren't maybe considering a multilingual family unit. That could be a reason.
I think probably there was more multilingualism before than there is now. So yeah,
So if it's a multilingual household, asking what language spoken by the mother is much clearer than language ordinarily used. The multilingual household, you'll use more than one language, yeah.
if the whole idea is to codify, then you have to go somewhere. So I think they went via the idea of mother tongue to the actual mother, like, just to make something singular. But the mother probably knows many languages too, right? I mean, normally, your mothers may know like 1, 2, 2, 3, you know, so.
But the idea here is this one primary language and there are multiple languages. Or that's how we understand it today.
That's how, yeah. Maybe, yeah. For us, you want to.
So I was saying it's not just about the assumption or something. Basically, is it on? So it's like, you know, it's like, as they say, why did they go with the mother tongue and not the first language? And I will just reiterate what you both said, that if you are saying there is first language, it means there is a second language also. And while you are
Yeah.
doing the census, you have to assign, like, there is one territory, there is a region there, there is a religion there, and there is a language there. And that's how you bond it, that's how you mark it, and that's how you rule it. That was one of the colonial modernity framework. And even if they were not fooled, they knew that it's a multilingual society and everything. And the whole idea is like, they are coming from Europe, where it's like, you know, it's like we are the one holding to our culture, traditions and all, and they are the one going with the modernity and the scientific things and all. So they are doing it because there is this one nation, one language thing in their mind that you need to do that for development. Well, we are multilingual, so we assign them, one language, and that's how we rule them. That's how we divide them, because they knew people are multilingual. The same person is speaking like 2-3 different varieties, like, so I think that was the reason why did they go with mother tongue, because when you say mother tongue, it's like just one, and that's how you bind the population. So, yeah. Is it
The whole homogenization process that they
Yeah.
were trying to follow in terms of linguistic diversity itself. I mean, they were not really accounting for the actual variety of the languages, right? I mean, they were basically, creating imagined communities and sorting people into it. So, I mean, that's a.
They were not accounting for the actual language practices being spoken. That was not their project. It was part of modernization where they were creating imaginary communities based on language. That's what you said. Yeah.
Grayson had a big role in that.
Yeah, because I think the census essentially codified, right? It was to standardize certain identities, even in terms of caste and religion, the
Yes.
same thing happens. So it could be the same.
To codify and standardize identity. So like you said, that was never about capturing actual linguistic situations and documenting them. It never could have done that, and it still doesn't do that. Yeah, that's a very nice point. Okay, so a student had brought up the gendered nature of mother tongue, so I was going to address that. So the relationship between mother tongue and the speech of the mother is the association of a mother tongue with a mother problematic. Patanayak says yes, definitely. So he argues that the current census definition is inadequate and even misleading, in part because sometimes Indian children will grow up speaking the father's dialect. And he says this occurs in patrilocal families or families where the mother is deceased. Right. So I think he's really saying that you can't actually capture the linguistic situation of every household by just using the category mother tongue. You have to also look at the father tongue. And so Patanayak's book was 1981. But this critique is continuing, and there's a lot of recent news articles with the same critique. So just as an example, educator and activist Thakur discusses how mother tongue is most likely does not refer to the language knowledge that a kid requires from his or her mother, but rather to the language of the environment in which the child is raised. So here he's not talking about the census intention in this definition, but our lay idea of what mother tongue is more likely related to the language environment in which the child is raised rather than just the language of the mother. But I think this is something we can also discuss and debate as well. And in saying it's problematic, it's making the point that the student made that asking a mother tongue is not really going to give you an idea of that person's linguistic situation. So Ian Namalay is a Tamil scholar who is at the University of Chicago for many decades, but also based in Tamil Nadu. And he discusses how the term mother tongue is differently employed in practice. So how it's used in, by everyday people within India. So he outlines 4 different uses in his 2018 article. So it's used as the language of one's mother, the language of primary socialization. So that's similar to this the Thakur definition here. It's a language used while growing up, the language you speak while in your childhood being raised. It's used as a language of communicative competence or like primary communicative competence. But then he gets to the political and social aspects. He said it can also be the language by which people label their linguistic identity as adults And that one does not have to be necessarily competent in the language for this cultural or political identification. So there are many examples of this, and I'm sure you guys can give many examples of this, but example from my recent research is that the owner of a South Indian hotel in Colombo, I interviewed him in Tamil. He's a Tamil speaker, and he said, I want you to know my mother tongue is not Tamil. My family lived in Tamil Nadu for centuries, but we're originally from Andhra. So my mother tongue is Telugu. When his family came to Colombo by ship in the 1920s. So he said, people think I'm Tamil, but I'm not. My mother tongue is Telugu. But he said that Telugu was lost in his generation. So he no longer speaks Telugu, but he identifies Telugu as his mother tongue because it's his identity. But he grew up speaking Tamil entirely, right? So this is an example of mother tongue being a linguistic identity that has very relevant socially, politically, culturally, but doesn't actually have to do with it being a language you speak or are fluent in, right? But of course, in India, there are many examples of this kind of phenomenon. There's also some articles I read recently that there's been an increase in people declaring Sanskrit as a mother tongue on the census. So maybe you have some comments about that, but. Oh, let me give you the.
So there was I think people's movement to make government consider the importance of Sanskrit, and to do so, there are people who are propagating to other Sanskrit knowing people that you should mention Sanskrit as your mother tongue.
So that's why there is an increase in the census.
Yes.
And what does it mean for the people declaring Sanskrit as a mother tongue?
Sorry?
It's a religious identity. It's a cultural identity. It's
Cultural. Yes. It is, but it is not only, of course, yes, but it is not limited to, there are many languages which are obviously in which religious texts are written. So they do have religious identity, but the people who are into Sanskrit, and for example, I love Sanskrit, but it is not because my religious texts are written in
so
Sanskrit.
you're a scholarly interest.
Yeah. So I would also prefer to do so. Though I have not got a chance to do so, but I would prefer to do so. It is not because of my religious identity, but because I would also like to give importance to Sanskrit. But yes, not as my mother tongue.
Because of heritage.
Not as my mother tongue, but as my first language, maybe, yes.
But it does have a religious.
It does, of course, yes. Of course, yes.
But for you, that's not the primary reason you would name it.
I am in touch with a lot of people who love Sanskrit, and there is also what do I say, a tradition to be declared as a Sanskrit family. So where people are communicating with each other in Sanskrit. And then they like their family to be declared as Sanskrit Kutumbam.
Oh.
Yes. And it is also not because of religion, because it's a third or second generation family members who prefer to do. Their parents may not be speaking, or their grandparents may not be speaking Sanskrit, because they love Sanskrit.
Oh.
Yeah, I do agree with the, I mean, there are families agreeing to be a Sanskrit Kudumba or whatever. But don't you think this language comes with a lot of baggage in terms of restricted access? The fact that you have access, I mean, a particular person has access to this language and can use this language, which was reserved up until a lot. No, I'm just saying that, I mean, you talked in, I mean, what I could infer from what you said was the religious associations, this language has been removed per se. I mean, that it's not the major cause, but I would argue that it still exists because
I'm not denying the fact, but I'm saying that it is not the
it is not the,
only reason.
it's not the only reason. Yeah, yeah, in that case, yes, definitely. Right.
No, I think what he's pointing to is
Some of it still influences not only the access to Sanskrit nowadays, but also how Sanskrit is perceived in general. No, I'm just replying to when you said that there is, I mean, I think the religious association of Sanskrit is a lot more unique to Sanskrit than its association with other languages because of the historical inaccessibility.
Add something to your identity. Right? That is the question. And that identity has to do with rather hegemonical position that Sanskrit has held throughout these centuries. So that's the point. So it's not like we can't basically generalize the point that these people were doing it for the love of the Sanskrit. I mean, even if they were, the fact that the language has held a very revered position in the culture is a reason for that. So that's what I think I was trying to emphasize.
But yeah, anyway, I think this is a prime example of like a ideological field in which, you know, the question of, but the question of even enumerating a mother tongue and also to kind of, announce a language as a mother tongue, any language, I would say, has an ideological dimension, right? And located in historical things. So that is there. Now, individual people or groups of people may have different reasons once you have languages that are available to you for identifying. I mean, sure, someone who maybe doesn't know, like if someone asked me and I said, yeah, Telugu, even though I don't know Telugu, but maybe I really like it. I tell the census person, Telugu is my mother tongue. I mean, no one's gonna check, right? So I can have any reason for doing that, right? But there is if many people are identifying Telugu, there's a reason why Telugu is a mother tongue, right? And why people are identifying with that, because there's a cultural reason, social reason, all kinds of things in which this thing called Telugu, like what Tom Troutman, do you remember that article? What's the hullabaloo about Telugu?
Yeah.
Even Telugu getting enumerated from Tamil in the 19th century was like a huge ideological battle. So it's not just something like this, right? So that's the thing, right? So this thing called Telugu, which eventually came to the first linguistic state, Andhra Pradesh. All of this was a hot ideological field. Well, right now it's just default. Telugu is not a contested thing. Right? So every language, when we're asked to identify something, can be very, it's located in all of these things that you're talking about.
Hello. Yeah. So I just wanted to, it might sound stupid, but most of the time historically we have seen, like when it comes to land, we make it motherland, as in we have a possession over the land itself. And historically, paternity was not something which was determined. We had maternity could be determined, but paternity before the advent of genetics or genetic testing was not really understood that way. So, but maternity was something which could be pointed out, like this is my mom because I have come out from her womb. So perhaps it was easier for us to accept mother tongue as we having possession over it being more definitive than making it father tongue, like historically, because the same thing we see in like motherland, matribhumi, when we have used in freedom, even in nationalism, we always have, we could contest a female body, you know, we can have possession over a female body, female space. So it was easier for people to access mother tongue than father tongue or primary language or first language, I think. It might sound stupid, just I wanted to put it out.
The concept of West and East is totally different. Religious structure. And then she's okay.
Okay, I think I have a few slides left. And that's. And I think a point I wanted to make about Anomaly is that in an article, he talks about how all of these definitions can conflict or contradict each other. So that's something that was very apparent in their discussions. For example, like the man who identified Telugu as his mother tongue, even though he doesn't speak it, well, obviously definition 4 is conflicting with definitions 1, 2, or 2 and 3. I think his mother actually probably did speak Telugu. So. Right, so we already talked about that. So more critiques of the use of mother tongue in the census. So several scholars have pointed to the overall failure of the census to accurately depict India's, particularly its multilingual. But as one student pointed out already, maybe that wasn't the intention of the census, right? The census takes second and third languages into account, but focused on mother tongue. Right, so the focus is mother tongue, even though it also asked about second and third languages. So some believe that the census should look at people's proficiency in different languages rather than asking for a mother tongue. So let's just take like decenter mother tongue, and the census should just ask, what languages are you proficient in? And that way the census would get a better idea of India's sociolinguistic situation, and particularly its multilingualism. So how about mother tongue and English in education policy? This is something we're going to talk about throughout the course, but the onset of the policy of economic liberalization in 1991 brought more emphasis on English and Indian education. Globalization, neoliberalism have increased the demand for English. English is viewed as a prerequisite for access to higher education and government and private sector employment. But recent education policies, such as the 2020 National Education Policy, emphasize mother tongue, but make little mention of English, right? So mother tongue is very central in current Indian policy. So, example, India's Right to Education Act of 2009 mandates free and compulsory education for all Indian children between the ages of 6 and 14. Section 29, number 2 recommends that the medium of instruction shall, as far as practical, be in a child's mother tongue. However, it does not provide any explanation of mother tongue. It doesn't define mother tongue, and it does not mention English. So the census defines mother tongue, the right to education not. So it leaves it kind of vague and unexplained, and the document makes no reference to English. The 2020 National Education Policy, it proposes a revision to many aspects of the structure of the Indian education system. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. The policy states that students should learn in their mother tongue wherever possible. English is mentioned only in the context of its offering of a subject of study along with other languages and the need for bilingual textbooks in certain subjects. And I believe that engineering was among one of the subjects mentioned. The 2020 NEP explains how mother tongue often corresponds to a home language and a local language, but that such is not always the case in multilingual families. So here's the exact quote from the NEP. Home language is usually the same language as a mother tongue or that which is spoken by local communities. However, at times in multilingual families, there can be a home language spoken by other family members, which may sometimes be different from mother tongue or local language. So student brought up how migration implicates mother tongue. This is something actually addressed in the NEP. The document later specifies the need for education until grade B home language / mother tongue / local language / regional language, but it does not discuss how these terms differ. And if you very closely read the document, you can't get a sense of exactly how these terms differ. So I think it's sort of loosely saying, a mother tongue often corresponds to a home language, often corresponds to a local language, but not in multilingual families. But then how about the regional language? It throws that in later, right? So, right, I think actually the tutorial topic is going to address that. Is it time for a break now, or should we start the tutorial? Or?
Yeah, shall we go straight through? Or a break? Fine.
We already did this a little. I'll move around and use this microphone.
So question number 1 is really just a review of what we talked about. If we wanted, we could jump to number 2. So students could list the different views of policy and practice. We
Great,
can make a list and then discuss, I think.
great.
Does
Yes.
that make sense?
Yes, we'll go to number 2. And would you like, I'll run back some of the slides.
But I mean, the idea for number 2 is their own ideas of what the definitions are, not from the slides.
Just to give them some.
Okay.
All right, so list the different meanings of mother tongue in policy and practice in India. From your own experience, can be a source. And would you like for me to run back the definitions just so you have a refreshing of that? Great.
But this is the anomaly, so they're going to have additions and other ideas.
Yes. Obviously, we don't want you to just repeat these. In other words, get specific and detailed from your own experiences. And think about yourself and all of the various ideas you have about.
One thing is maybe you can get in some.
And maybe even interview each other.
Yeah. Talk about just like what meanings are.
Yeah, like when you have conversations with like friends or family members and you say mother tongue, what are you meaning when you say it?
Yes.
That's something you can think about. Different things, right?
And if you interview each other, it's nice because you can take notes about what other people are saying. So you can keep all of that detail among yourselves. These three have already started, so you're our model. I loved what you said. My favorite is in, you must be very familiar with this. My favorite was in schools. I would interview kids in Varanasi, government schools, private schools. And I'd ask them about Sanskrit, and they would say the usual, you know, which was all very heartfelt. It's our, you know, the mother and the all of that. And, you know, our innermost feelings about the world. And then I would say, well, is that why you took it in school? No, sir. No, it has nothing, because it's like math. I liked what you said. I'm sure, I'm sure. Yes. That I liked what you had to say. So they're doing the very same thing, you know. There are very heartfelt ideas about it. Yes, yes. But then also they're academically, you know, motivated. Yeah, it looks lovely.
In like most of the world, I guess, was like non-standard anyway. So they didn't have any idea of like even that language. There wasn't any kind of idea of like language in that sense. Even like where I'm working now, people don't even talk like if you ask what their language is, they'll always say what language you speak something. They'll say, oh yeah, we don't know, but other people kind of say. Like,
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
So they're like a concept, like their language sounds like a thing like this. It's just like, oh yeah, what we speak, but other people say we're like this, like this.
This one and further. Oh.
Oh, I think this is
My favorite is I was once talking to this granny. She said, I know I want to ask you a question about your mother tongue. And she said this word, and I didn't know what it was. Love juice daddies. Love juice daddies. Love juice. And I said, love juice daddies. Got it. I'm not.
What is
and
it?
she said, so I was love juice daddies. Love juice daddies. And then her daughter came home during the interview, and I said, love juice daddies? Yeah. And she said, oh, love juice daddies. That which Americans speak. And I said, what? And she said, Baywatch movie?
Oh yeah. Like a Baywatch language.
She said, that's your mother tongue. You're on the beach, and the boy and the girl are trying to have a baby.
Love. Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that hysterical? This old granny, and she didn't mean anything ironic, nothing. She was like, how does the language that you speak just attract that girl? I just always love that. Our mother tongue is love you stories because it makes the girls love you stories. And it just, she said, when you
I
speak,
thought the word was Hindi, so I took that.
no, she said, when you speak, the clothes just fall off the woman. And she said, it was Baywatch would come on, and I realized Pamela Anderson was just running in a G-string on the beach. That's like this woman's access to like what Americans are like. I loved it. Loved you stuff.
But yeah, Pamela's so multi-dimensional.
Well, I don't think it's branded.
I'm joking. Did you guys watch it?
No.
You should.
What was it like? Is she really multi-dimensional?
She is.
I can imagine. But for this woman, it was just, and she was being totally earnest. She said, when my husband and I were talking, it was hilarious. She had like two.
It's a great social.
Boiled apple.
Sure.
You boiled it?
I boiled it, yeah.
Why do you boil it?
They said it's good for like digestion.
Wow.
Oh.
Does it help like break it down?
Ah, that's part of my diet basically this and this. No. It's just a half boiled apple. After eating, like a few hours after your meal, you should have some boiled apple. Helps.
Oh, you should tell me like anything.
Research involved? No.
Good gosh.
No colitis.
That I could possibly have, because in India, everyone has that. You know, the public health department of Ann Arbor called me. Like, yeah, you have this, don't go swimming.
Really?
Just eat a bit and you'll feel it.
I taught a class at a
Yeah, class should go to midnight. Or maybe we can tell them tomorrow.
It's true. It would
in
help.
my class, if they're just booked the most language in the back.
The first class I ever taught was 800 people.
I heard Chicano and Chicago. The class.
Oh, really?
It was very on.
The largest city in Illinois?
You had 800 people?
Yeah, it was terrible. Frat boys would throw paper airplanes at me on the stage from the back.
I felt like
No, you zero.
oh, sorry. Hamilton, like that would not have been 800.
700 links again.
JLA subscribers.
SLA?
Oh, I just renewed, so 701.
Austin said there are
I
actually,
renewed after 3 years.
Austin was saying there are 1,400. So, you know, people who we count as people who pay dues, but he was saying there are only really 700 active people.
Yeah, but I was one of the inactive ones.
Yes.
So then I wouldn't have been there. But now
We're really small.
And Austin, guess what he said? He said, can you believe we're so huge in number?
from his era, maybe. It seems
No,
big.
he said, you know what Austin is like. He said, according to Secure's calculations, there should be far fewer of us.
How is he, by the way? He had a stroke and everything.
He's
Austin?
recovered
Yeah, he did.
I had no idea when.
for years and years.
Because at last AAA.
He was like, yeah, at one point
He's
he was
really
like,
recovered.
he was like a bit off.
Oh,
A bit could be an understatement.
I heard he had to relearn something.
Oh.
Maybe we learned speaking. When did this occur?
Not speaking, just some things.
Did you have to relearn honorific?
When did this start? Oh, okay. I thought it was like recent.
In Lhasa, Tibet.
Lhasa, Tibet. Hey, you remember you did that at some point in your life. Lhasa, Tibet. Where you started reading British newspapers. Oh, and then like something like a British.
He never talks about the past. Do you think all that England feeling of hurting? I've heard, and this, I'm totally.
Yeah, the elite class people, they have like super, even more than India. Yeah.
What's her name? Javaria?
Yeah, that like Jane Austen.
I was like, whoa.
The Pakistan. Chinese.
My friend is on a diplomatic mission to China, seminar in Chinese language and culture for diplomatic officials from the Philippines.
Oh, nice.
What country? Like, what country? Yeah, it's like the sea. Not even that Africa.
I wonder if their discussions are like this.
I'm wondering if it's like the same. It's the same.
I'm not sure the Chinese do that much.
Not everybody's wearing a suit.
Right.
They were supplied with KFC.
Fried chicken.
Guys, it's super
Oh,
good.
oh, but you can't have it. You're hard.
I probably ate it 4 times a week.
Why hard you? No, you can have a hard too without
Well,
be living
China
healthy.
aid for sure future. So they're giving aid to organizations.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh my God. That's,
But US does the same thing.
oh God. USDA.
USA.
Yeah.
They're buying it. The
It's
Chinese.
USA to public.
They're talking all kinds of creepy stuff.
It's USA to people. I have a lot to learn. I need to make newspaper.
And she
Wait,
encourages.
Laura Ahern has stopped working in Rutgers.
So she has no moral.
I don't know how
So
that.
USA does also. Sri Lanka.
India doesn't allow.
Bring the similar people to villages in the north.
Oh wow. Oh wow. That's like solid.
I wouldn't be surprised. US aid is very more even sketchier than China aid after
Oh, and some people are wearing a traditional dress. Like, what's their tie?
It'll be like all countries. Well, India won't be there. India's like fighting.
There's Sri Lanka.
Oh, there.
There's India.
India, Lebanon.
Yeah, India. So what are all the countries here?
These are all the countries where China gives aid, I guess.
Israel,
Israel's a developing country. Or China.
Lebanon,
What's the one with the tree?
Lebanon.
Tanzania,
Lebanon?
Lebanon is with the Peter.
Sri Lanka?
Bangladesh,
Bangladesh.
Japan is developing country.
Japan's
Oh.
there? How is
Belarus.
Japan a developing country?
What is Tokyo right now? In any hotel or anywhere. it's like China. Their whole
Egypt.
economy depends on China. Japan.
So that's why they're part of this.
They hate it.
What's this one?
That's China. China itself is getting.
I need to read more newspapers.
China itself is getting China 80.
is that Ireland? I think so.
Is he allowed to be sending me these photos? Is he gonna get in trouble?
I mean, they just randomly put all the flags. Like from like an
What's
emoji,
this
but
one?
Nepal? Don't tell Erica you didn't know that. Dr. Birthplace. Pakistan. Zindabad.
I think they fly them with alcohol.
Is that North Korea? I think.
Oh, that's North Korea's there?
I believe so.
Which one? This one?
I think that's
Do
North
they
Korea.
really have a North Korean representative there?
China has been relations.
Maybe the North Korean is there on Zoom.
Oh, China? Oh,
They're
you
gone.
go on the train. There's like Pyongyang to like Vladivostok train.
That's a train you want to take.
Oh, this is probably the.
A torture train. Zoomed with my buddy in China the other day. She was like, don't be just a horror story of your heart. Yeah, she's like,
Oh, the
can you want education?
but everyone's working on education.
My diabolical plot.
Taken over. Even Miriam was educated. What about the new hire? No, this guy.
He hasn't come yet, but he seems lovely. He does dubbing. Politics of
Oh,
dubbing.
dubbing.
Like, super excited.
He reviewed Krista's book.
He's very ironic and sarcastic. We're just thrilled.
You guys can get along.
Chenyu is so funny, so excited because there was a circular at Hamilton. We love pomp and circumstance. That was the first line, and then he called Chenyu and he was like, "What the hell is this? Pomp and circumstance?" And Chenyu was like, "Yeah, it's just a way to get you to come to commencement or convocation or whatever." And he was like, "What kind of?" Yes, it was great.
But you have to maintain a good attitude, otherwise, because it's your workplace, right? You can't maintain like a Miriam type attitude.
Yes, we're all cynical, and then she was like, "You're just cynical. You're not destructive." She said that we were high. What did she say? High liberals, the worst people, worst fascists are high liberals.
Oh, a lot of people say that. A lot of my
She's
friends
on
are
that.
saying that.
She said we must-
Non-academics.
She said burning down anthropology is not enough. We must burn down Hamilton.
The center of global
She said,
anthropology,
I quote her.
Hamilton.
Yes. But she was here.
They're gonna give interesting answers.
I've been taking notes, but record. Great. Cool.
At 5:30, what time should we start the discussion?
Maybe 5 minutes? Sure. Everyone, let's talk for about 5 more minutes and then we'll get together. How does that sound? Is that okay? I feel like a talk show host. You get a car.
What?
You get a car. You know Oprah. Oprah Winfrey. Oprah. When she gives everyone things and points to the. You get a mother tongue. You get a mother. Sorry. So how did you come to be involved with us?
I was here for the summer. Doing the summer work, summer Like, there is nothing else. I also did was linguistic anthropology.
You were the TA or
No, no,
teaching
I was-
assistant?
No,
Or-
no, I took his course.
Oh,
I was
you were his student. You want to do visual linguistic anthropology?
I think that's very, very something like that.
Professor Joxy is, I think that's what he does, so. he-
Visual linguistic anthropology.
Yes, he looks at scripts and you know, yes. It's so complicated. I was in Delhi back in late June. And I was supposed to stay in Delhi. I had a medical issue, go home. And then surgery is scheduled for August. I asked the doctor, I told the doctor about the course and how I wanted to come back. And doctor said, fine, you know, you can't do anything about your problems. We have to just do surgery. So just go. So I came. I found it. I've never in my life. I went on kite. And because I thought, how do I get there? Now I can go, but you know, and I thought maybe the ticket would be so much. So I went on kayak, and then it sent me to something called High Flight. And that website put together a very cheap ticket from where I live to New York to Qatar, and Qatar to Mumbai on 3 different airlines. The price was so low, I couldn't. So I did it. No, it was because I really wanted to come. I was heartbroken. But I was in Delhi, I was doing the same project, interviewing students about mother tongue. They were giving similar and very different dynamics. It was Central Institute of Education at DU, and students were more UP, Bihar, Haryana, Rajasthan, not like here where students are really in Northeast and there it's a little more, and so they were giving answers that I was more familiar with from my work in Eastern UP. Very different. Here, there's no assumption that we are the center of the universe. Does that make sense? And everything.
We have 5 Kerala people.
Nishant sir, that when I came last time, 3 years ago, it's an amazing thing. I lived in India for 3 years by that time, but I don't feel like I know it at all. You know, because of cosmopolitan idea. Does that make sense? Yeah. Whereas I feel for people in they feel like Delhi is the, center of their world, but it's not accessible. And I also feel like maybe everyone's looking down. Hard to hear. And they even say things, they're very open. Go there. If we stay here, we just stay 4. Of course, not everyone. I was studying in government or even municipal corporation of Varanasi. They're just trying to do education, but not, with not many resources. No? Ah, you are from Kerala. Which part? I don't know it well. In the park. Yes, perfect. Oh, right, of course. It's much easier. And I'll use this for there. Yes. All right, everyone. Who wants to share their ideas? I'll come to you, and anyone wants to be a spokesperson for their group?
I think we delineated a bit.
Sorry, I probably.
I think we delineated a bit from the discussion at hand, but these are the points that, we were discussing about. So according to Anna's experience that now all of us know about her, she doesn't know how to answer this question, what is her mother tongue? So basically we all agreed that mother tongue is an exclusive idea and it is homogenizing when we live in a culture that is multilingual and it does not encapsulate that practice, which is very central to our country. I mean, our country is known as the paradise of linguists. There are just so many languages, right? And policy does not address this either. Second point is that we all got to talking about the language that we think in. So it would be a language which we reflect best in, the language that we can express ourselves best in. So it has to do with proficiency as well. So we discussed which languages do we reflect in. So for some of us, it's multilingualism there again. If we are engaging with academic ideas, we tend to think in English maybe. If it's personal stuff, maybe our own mother tongue. For me, it's not my mother tongue in which my internal monologue is, it's mostly English. So then Shruti talked about her awareness as well as how she identifies this idea of mother tongue. So because she is so well aware of the political nuances of Tamil language and the movement that is there in her state, basically we talked about how language is central to the construction of identity. So I think she talked about caste identity, class identity, and then the identity of state as based on a language.
Great. And when you said you had difficulty kind of thinking about what mother tongue you would have in the beginning, I don't know if I got that right, but
it is primarily because Anna, when she began, when I questioned her, what is your mother tongue? She said that like her parents speak with each other, with your permission, in Malayalam, but they never spoke to their children in Malayalam.
really?
And with her parents, she speaks in either yeah.
Hindi or English?
Yeah, so with my father, it's English.
Hindi or English?
So with my father, it's English. With my mother, it's Hindi. So I have no acquisition of the Malayalam language via my family and because of the place that we were located. So since we were in North India, I grew up learning Hindi. So now, what do I say is my mother tongue? Is it English? Is it Hindi? Is it Malayalam? So that's why I say for me, the concept of mother tongue is very ambiguous. I really cannot say that I have it.
But however, I think that this happens in urban setups more when you are exposed to multilingual cultures. But if I talk about my house help and her son, he lives in a, like, they live in a nearby village and they have only access to Gujarati. So it would be better to teach that person, that little boy, in Gujarati. I mean, he should be studying in Gujarati, because otherwise, like, if he would go to school and the teacher would be talking to him in English, a lot of confusion would happen. And so I believe, like, even with my own personal experience, it was my parents' conscious choice that I would study in Gujarati medium. So I do believe that mother tongue, or the language with which the child is familiar to, does make a difference in education policies and practices.
Yes.
I do think, because otherwise the child has to work two fronts. One, he has to translate, and the other thing is he has to understand the concept which teacher is trying to teach.
Excellent.
So mind will have to work at two fronts at that time.
But
Yes.
the mind of a child up to the age of 6 is very receptive to multiple
It's a different
languages.
thing. That is a different
I don't think it creates a confusion. I think it's very easy to raise bilingual children.
Yes.
Let them make. Let the
We couldn't
research
reach a
say.
consensus.
Yes,
We addressed
which
it.
is a great,
Agree that any form of policy or any kind of practice can actually, encompass so much deviations that we have.
Because it cannot
yes,
cover everything.
incorporate all of this.
Yeah. Like, even the people who are the tribal people of Gujarat, they would not be speaking Gujarati. They would be speaking the tribal. So if somebody would try to teach them in Gujarati, it would be a problem for them. So I mean, they should be taught in tribal languages. That is what. So the language with which they are familiar with, that is what.
Familiarity, I see. Whatever, and yes. Who, yes.
Here when we were discussing about the idea of a mother tongue. Diksha said the idea of mother tongue is very different for her.
It's on.
Yeah. So I can go into the details. So her mother comes from Haryana. So the mother's primary language is Haryanvi, but she grew up in Uttar Pradesh speaking Hindi.
Yes.
So Hindi, because the entire environment and her family spoke Hindi, the language that she would prefer is Hindi, but the concept of mother tongue does not go along with it because it's not the language of her mother.
Absolutely.
And then we had a different case where the three of us could not decide on what would be our mother tongue, or for Gao, it's undefined. Similar case. And even in my situation, I would prefer a multilingual identity, not a single language as my mother tongue. And then we also discussed about the idea of thinking in a particular language. That we learn a specific language, but because most of us are educated in English, we tend to think in English, but we also have a sense of familiarity with the language spoken at home. And the idea of a mixed code as a language or a process.
That's a wonderful point. We haven't even talked yet about mixing.
Yeah. And Rashmi also brought up the idea of hierarchy when choosing a particular language or presenting a particular language as their language, or the question of associating themselves with their language. So we discussed a bunch of issues, but yeah, we could not conclude what multilingual could be. I would also like to propose two parallel ideas in a way that one could be about multilinguals who grew up speaking multiple languages at the same time, and the current generation who is exposed to English from a very early age. So they tend to mix English with their home language. And could that even be considered a language or not?
Or
Thank
a
you.
mother tongue.
Yeah.
Great.
So we had quite a few definitions, and I'd start with one very interesting one that came from Faraz. So Faraz says, to quote him,
mother tongue is a tongue that mother asks you, that mother says, form mein bharna hai. So I think you get it, but mother tongue is a tongue that the mother asks you to put in the form.
Yes.
But then after, I just nudged him further and I was like, okay, maybe you can give an alternative one too. It's very good. The other one, so he came up with one more that's not as funny, but he says, and it's a very important one, he says the language you initially think in. So the first language that you think initially think in, because you, as we were having a came up that we can be thinking in multiple languages. Then he was like, maybe initially, but the language you initially think in. Then there is curious case of Adarsh. Adarsh has a very, very, very interesting case because he's from Kushinagar in UP. His parents and his immediate surroundings, they were speaking Bhojpuri.
Yes.
But there was a deliberate effort to make him learn Hindi as his first language. So he learned Hindi, but to interact with his immediate surroundings and people who were in his locality and everybody, he did switch to Bhojpuri. So he picked up Bhojpuri, he talked in Bhojpuri to fit in, to talk to people. But when his friends entered his house, they switched to him. So now he's confused because then later on, as he grew older, he has switched to Bhojpuri in home also with certain family members. And sometimes his mother speaks to him in Bhojpuri and he talks to her in Hindi. So when asked, so what is a mother tongue to you? So for him, it's not the first language he's spoken. To him, it is more associated with the, he does not take household as a primary marker of a mother tongue, but the regional area. So, and in this case, it's very interesting because he's from UP. So the bigger regional language is Hindi, Khadi Boli Hindi, or whatever it is. But for him, it was Bhojpuri. That, and it becomes fairly simpler for Rashid. Rashid is like whatever I first spoken, whatever I interacted with people around me. And it's that, for him, it's Malayalam. So for him, there's no binary between the language of the household, the language of the immediate surrounding, and maybe the greater surroundings too, at school too. But it was so different for others. For me, my mother transitioned from, her mother tongue was Avdi, but I was taught Hindi. I consider, for me, mother tongue is the first language I learned talking in or speaking in or interacting in. So for me, it was Hindi, but for my father's mother tongue is Kannauji, and Kannauji and Avdi are very different. And they're 300 kilometers apart geographically too. But my mother tongue is Hindi. And I had no problem accepting it as my mother tongue. I learned talking in Avdi when I was 5 years old because I wanted to talk to my nani in her, my maternal grandmother in her language. She spoke Avdi. She still, till her death, she spoke in Avdi with my mother. My mother speaks in Avdi with her siblings, but she always speaks in Khadi Boli Hindi with me. So for me, it's simpler. And similarly for Dr. Gaurav, for him, so for him, Marwari is his mother tongue because he spoke it as the first language. And there are a lot of languages that happen in Rajasthan again, and then you pick it up and given whatever immediate surrounding you are in, and they use Hindi very dominantly as a link language. Yes. And again, for Dr. Afreen, it's way more interesting, and I think she'll explain it better. Yeah, go ahead.
My father used to speak in Hindi and my mother used to speak in Gujarati. So we have a mixture of language. So yeah, I can say my mother language is Hindi. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So we, both of us initially started and then we just gradually merged into the group. I think while we were discussing, we came to this idea that mother tongue for us might be like a socialization. It is something we have been said from a childhood. Your mother tongue is Odia, your mother tongue is Odia, your mother tongue is Odia. And I just took it for granted. Okay, my mother tongue is Odia. But even if that's not the reality at home, that realization of how that language is different came very late. So for me, still my mother tongue is a socialization of an idea that I had from the child.
I couldn't hear you. Where?
Socialization,
Socialization.
of what I had from a childhood, something I was instructed to think and do in for government purposes, definitely. And what me and her talked about were mostly policy implications for mother tongue based multilingual education. The first question we had was, what would be the mother tongue you would be choosing for your policy? Like we have been debating on various varieties. If we are taking, first we would like to think which variety we would like to pick. It is impossible if you take up all the varieties in India. So definitely we will be going up with more homogeneous varieties like tribal languages. We are going to pick up tribal languages first and try to make their languages into mother tongue. But what would be a way to go about it? Suppose, for example, there is a language in Odisha called Santhali. A kid starts studying in Santhali all throughout the way till 12th class or schooling. After that, one has to get into college, and the college examinations are in Odia, the state language. So is studying in mother tongue not affecting his abilities in Odia and the social mobility? It is definitely affecting that. So this is one implication we thought. And the second one that we were thinking is, what do we think of bridging as a mechanism? Like the kid starts with their mother tongue, but slowly transitions into the state language. That is something that Odisha does. But she had an idea on how right now her mother tongue has just started reviving. The teachers in her mother tongue right now are just learning. They have forgotten the script, how to read and write. Maybe she can explain.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think Anmesha. So I think Anmesha already gave a very nice brief. So a little bit about me for like about my mother tongue language first. I identify myself as a Chakma. My surname is Chakma. In my documents, I write that I'm from the Chakma community. It is an indigenous community considered a scheduled tribe. The language I speak is Chakma. The community is called Chakma, but the census identifies me as a Bengali speaker, although the script is completely different from Bengali. So what happened is in the 60s and 70s, when my parents were growing up, their generation sort of gave in to the hegemonic realities of the time, and they sort of accepted the Bengali language in the schools because that was the dominant language after partition, when a lot of people from East Pakistan came into my home state, Tripura. So there was a lot of Bengali. Bengali became the state language from a minority of 30% of the population. They are now a majority, 70% of the population. So it's a state language now. But what happened is, for a larger chunk of this generation, they did not get to learn the language, the script. So they can speak Chakma, they cannot read or write Chakma. So what happened after 2011 was the government gave them the permission that you can implement this language in your schools. So they have Chakma schools as well, but we don't have teachers to teach the script. So that is a policy gap. We don't have teachers to teach the script because a lot of that generation were never given the opportunity to learn that script, to learn the mother tongue language, because it was considered a minority language. It was considered a language which did not deserve to be recognized as a formal language. Because of that, today we have the policies in place. We have students, Chakma students, we have Chakma teachers, but we don't have trained teachers. So today, if I can speak Hindi, but I am not well acquainted with the Devanagari script, I cannot tomorrow become a Hindi teacher. So today we have Chakma teachers. We have teachers who can speak the Chakma language, but we do not have teachers who are well aware of the Chakma script. So I think that is a major divide.
Definitely.
In comparison, this is a very non-interesting group because as it happens, most of us have lived in a monolingual setup for the most part. So rather than going through the individual story because it can be boring, I'll just go through the generalization that we have made. In the sense, for me and Anis, for instance, we both are from Kerala. We both identify linguistically as Malayalis. So for us, it has always been the social identity and the linguistic identity that we have formed. That like, and it is important to note that we have had to bring up this idea of a mother tongue only when we had were display, not of course not displaced, sorry, the wrong word, but we had to move to a place where another language is spoken. Up until that point in that monolingual setup, we did not have to think about, okay, no one is I mean, no one was coming at us and asking, okay, which is your mother tongue, because that was not in the question. So yes, of course, official forms apart, but then that was a go-to option. It was not a conscious thought. We were not really conceptualizing mother tongue when we were writing those things. And the second thing that matters a little more is the pragmatics aspect of it, because the one that I mentioned, the social identity and linguistic identity, falls on a more philosophical, politically aware aspect. But then there is also the pragmatics aspect about competency, because we would not, and anyone would not. I don't think people will be comfortable identifying or choosing a particular language as a mother tongue unless they are fluent and competent in it. Because when we say of course, all these political affiliations and the connection that we have with the regions apart, there is the whole practical aspect of it, to be using the language for writing and reading purposes. And for something what when I talk to Pratima, she basically understands the concept of, or she conceptualizes mother tongue as the language that she got used to from her family surroundings and socialization aspects. So that is also it. We also did some more of an extrapolation thinking, in the sense, because we were talking about some border areas where children who speak minority languages would not have an opportunity to choose the language as the mother tongue, because those languages are not in the either scheduled category, or there are no enough policy. In those cases, they will have to choose something that is available. It's often given a binary bit depending on the border. So these are the things we have drawn. That's about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. She has
No.
Starting one more point that I just remembered when she was talking about the revival of Chagma script. So recently, for the last 2 months, I was working on a project on Arabi Malayalam, right? Arabi Malayalam is an interesting thing that we can see like throughout in many places. Like in Kerala, the Muslims used to write Malayalam in Arabic script, and they called it Arabi Malayalam. And there were a lot of literature produced it till the 1950s. And the same phenomena we can see in Tamil Nadu. There is Arabic Tamil or the Arabi. In Sri Lanka, also there is Arabic text. And recently, like, I was working with some Arabi Malayalam enthusiasts, and they are trying to identify Arabi Malayalam as their mother tongue. And they are saying that Malayalam is not our mother tongue. And because they are saying that we used to write the Malayalam in Arabic script, and that's not the Malayalam that we are kind of standardized in Malayalam. Because if we go to the 18th century Arabic Malayalam text or to the 19th century Arabic Malayalam text, we can see a kind of a different type of language that our grandmothers were so fluent in it. And they were also reading such scripts. But when this standardization or the state formation happened, then the whole things changed into the Grantha script, that the formal Malayalam script that we are studying from schools. Still in Kerala, we can see a particular group of Muslims. They are teaching their students their religious things in using this Arabic Malayalam script only. So when we talk about the language, then we have to like kind of consider the visuality aspect or the scriptorial aspects also into it. Because if I say Malayalam is my mother tongue, not me, to me it is like the standard Malayalam, but for my grandmother or someone in a previous generation, their Malayalam might be like associated with that Arabic script or kind of, a kind of different lexicon it was containing, right? And I think we need to bring such niceties also to the more than this spoken aspect. Such aspects are there to be considered.
So in my case, like, I don't know. Okay. So like, I don't know like what exactly my mother tongue. So as we like everybody discussing what language we are speaking at home. So some people are speaking some different language, like the dialect Sekhavati, and then it's connected with your class identity also, and what your parents are doing and what kind of education you are getting. So like if you are speaking your mother tongue if at home also, then some people, maybe your neighbors or relatives, it's connect with your education, like your parents are not trying to provide you good education, so that also maybe make things difficult for the people. So I don't know if I can explain clearly. So like in the school also, if students speak their language that they speak at home, like the Sekhavati, so teachers, they put some fine on the students or they get some punishment also. So I think there's some kind of hierarchy also connected with the language also, what kind of language we are speaking. Even they ask to parents also to tell this to tell their kids not to speak their mother tongue at home. They ask to parents also, just try to tell your kids that either speak Hindi or English at home. So like this stigma is also attaching with the mother tongue, especially in the current generation.
No, I would just like to add one point, like all the points that have been given, that the assumption that there is a very close affinity to mother tongue and there is a respect attached to it or a warmth attached to it, that can no longer be taken for granted, I believe. Because like in most cases, like you have said, dominant languages are making subsidiary languages or minority languages putting it in an inferior position. I have faced a similar thing in a multilingual setting. Till I was a teenager, this question of mother tongue was never brought into the question. But when I went to a multilingual setting, it was brought into question. And of course, I affiliated myself to a Bengali community. But most of the people in that Bengali community would amongst themselves speak in Hindi or English. They will not speak in Bengali. And even if they do, we have different varieties which we speak in. So that affinity does not come. But there is there used to be a suppression or proscription from the parents themselves so that we could speak in Hindi or English and not in Bengali or any other dialect, so that there are better opportunities of employment. So it's a class marker and stuff like that.
I think the aspect of category is also important. For example, I am coming from the district of Wayanad. There are some tribal groups like Paniya, Kurichya, and they have their own kind of, language. But if you ask them what is your mother tongue, they don't have a name to kind of, to describe their language. It is not officially kind of recognized language. So normally they will be identifying after the school education sort of thing. Their mother tongue, they will be officially assigning it to Malayalam. Nowadays, there are some poets and others writing in their own language, but these are also coming in Malayalam, like, monthlies and all sort of things, giving the Malayalam meaning of it and kind of trying to consider it as a variety of Malayalam language. So yeah, the categories also under.
Absolutely.
We three have one person is left. So we have discussed about languages that we speak in our region. Am I audible? Okay. So in my region, I am from a Hindi speaking belt, but in my region particularly, the dialect which I speak, it is called Antarbedi. But as you move with the space, somewhere it is known as Pichraua. So, but it is something which has come from the mixture of Bundelkhandi, Avadi, and Braj. So, in my family particularly, my father speaks Bundelkhandi because he is from the Bundelkhand region, but my mother speaks Antarbedi. So, whatever I speak, it is a mixture of three, and it comes under the broader rubric of Hindi. But the problem is that if if we move out of our region and if we speak this language, this language is seen with a stigma, like it is a symbol of backwardness. So for example, if we move to the bigger towns and if we speak in our language, we will be termed as backward, dehati in Hindi. So speaking not that language becomes very important, to speak something which is considered as khadi boli. You will be socially recognized, accepted when you speak the khadi boli. So this is a problem, like the dilemma which we face as far as the language of my region is concerned. And yeah.
So I speak Telugu. My mother tongue is Telugu. But I want to share a funny incident that happened during my graduation days. So there is this shopkeeper nearby my home, and he did Pedda Bala Shiksha. That is like in their time, during their time when he was a kid, there is this just Telugu medium studies happened, and he happens to like emphasize all of his customers to speak in Telugu. So when I go to buy something, so he say Telugu mein pucho. So if I say, could you give me a toothpaste? Then he'll say, what is toothpaste in Telugu? So he'll emphasize like that time. So I said, like, why do you emphasize everything in Telugu? Then he said, you should learn your mother tongue. All terms should be in mother tongue and all. So he emphasized that way. Then I happen to get like annoyed. Why are you just always say, whenever I come to your shop, you first give me Telugu reference for that. And I say, like, why do you then make your children to study English medium? Is it like social acceptance? So, but it's like contradictory for me. So you make your customers to speak in Telugu, but your own children are learning and studying in English medium. So this is a funny incident. And to speak about the other person who left. So he is basically from a minority community called Lambadi. Lambadi community is a minority community in our state. So they speak Lambadi language. And that language is like he was saying, when within his home domain, they speak Lambadi, but out of home domain, they switch their language to Telugu. And now I asked him, like, which language do you consider as your mother tongue? Then he said, obviously Telugu, because I don't know Lambadi much. So that's what he said.
All right. Well, I think we're done for today. Is it time? And I think we
continue talking tomorrow about.
absolutely. We'll continue tomorrow, and I think
Relevant things tomorrow. Yeah.
yes. Tomorrow we will dive deeper into mother tongue and its relationships with some of the ideas we've been talking about today, institutions, education in particular. And we'll see you tomorrow. It's been a pleasure.